Good evening. Welcome to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show. My name is Leon Jones. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the pagan and genocidal roots of Thanksgiving. Now, I know it's a bit early, but Thanksgiving is basically on the first Thursday in November. And there are a number of us who are going to be celebrating Thanksgiving. But when it comes to we as African Americans, do we really know what Thanksgiving is? Many of us don't. We've been brainwashed into celebrating it. But while many of us do celebrate Thanksgiving, we don't understand the roots of Thanksgiving. So in this video, I'm going to explain it to you. Now, as we approach the annual European holiday of Thanksgiving, I thought it'd be a great idea to share with you about both the pagan and genocidal roots of the holiday of Thanksgiving and what it really represents. Now, since birth, we as a people, and I'm talking about we as African American or we as black people, have basically been socialized to partake in this holiday every year without having any idea where this celebration stemmed from or how it became so polarized. Now, after all, Thanksgiving was not celebrated by any of our ancestors before they were shipped here to the Americas from Africa, or by any of our ancestors that were already here prior to the Europeans' arrival. Now, we as a people know nothing about this holiday prior to being enslaved and colonized by the Europeans. Yet, today, it's one of the most esteemed holidays in Black America to both believers and non-believers, and we don't even care where Thanksgiving came from. Now, in school, we were taught that the Thanksgiving holiday started in the early 1600s when the European pilgrims and the Native Americans sat down after making a treaty over the land of America and celebrated with each other over a meal they called Thanksgiving. Now, for those of us who are conscious, we know this to be one of the biggest lies in history, in that the truth is that the Europeans slaughtered the Native Americans and celebrated their victory with a meal called Thanksgiving. And I'm going to discuss that more in detail in this video. Now, but moving on, or let's say I digress. But when it comes to Thanksgiving, many of us don't know is that the celebration of this holiday, known as Thanksgiving, did not originate here in America. It came from ancient Rome. Now, the celebration of Thanksgiving is one of the oldest celebrations in the world. What we know today as Thanksgiving is known to the ancients as a fall harvest festival. Now, since the reign of ancient Egypt, each culture of people celebrated a full harvest festival where the community would gather and eat the last harvest of their crops. And each of these festivals were dedicated to the worship of the god of that particular nation, honoring him or her for a great harvest. Now, the Egyptians' fall festival was centered around the worship of men, which that's the Israelites' fall festival, which is Sukkot, the biblical feast of the tabernacles, one of course centered around the worship of Yahuwah, the creator of the universe, and that's found in Leviticus chapter 23, verses 33 to 43. Now, the Babylonians' fall festival was centered around the worship of Marduk. The Persians' fall festival was centered around the worship of the Mithras. The Chinese fall festival was centered around the worship of Chong Chui. The Greeks' fall festival was centered around the worship of Demeter. And the fall festival centered around the Romans was known as the worship of Cereus. Now, in the 3rd century, after the Romans infiltrated the faith of the Nazarenes, the Israelite followers of Yahusha, who kept the Torah and turned it into the religion of Christianity, they incorporated their customs into it, including their fall harvest festival called Cerilia, which was rooted in the worship of Ceres, the goddess of the harvest. Now, the festival was held each year on October 4th, and the offerings of the first fruits of the harvest and pigs were sacrificed and offered up to Ceres. Now, the celebration included music, parades, games, and sports, and a Thanksgiving feast. Now, since Rome was the ruling power, they spread their pagan religion and pagan customs to each of the nations they conquered. Now, by the 6th century, and I'm talking about 6th century AD, the rulership of Rome had spread to England, and there the old Roman festival of Cerilia became known as the Harvest Home Festival, and later the Harvest Festival of Thanksgiving. Now, the Church of England adopted this festival as a religious gathering, but the festival was celebrated by both Christians and non-Christians, just as it is today. Now, over the next 1,000 years, the Church of England went through many political battles with Rome over political and religious issues, causing certain groups within the church to split and travel to the Americas in searching for power, wealth, religious freedom there. Again, you had political battles over Rome from the Church of England, where you had certain groups, they basically split, they traveled to the Americans in search of gaining power, wealth, and religious freedom, known as, well, in this country, known as America today. Now, that being said, one must ask, well, how did Thanksgiving spread to America? I'm going to give you that answer right now. Well, in the early 1600s, which is the 17th century AD, English explorers called the Pilgrims began traveling to the New World, trading metal, glass, and cloth for local beaver pelts with the Native Americans or the native people or Indians, and the Indians were living here, called the Wampanoag tribe, whom they call Indians. Now, the success of trades went so well that King James I of England issued a royal charter or a decree for England to claim land in America for England to conduct trade and make a profit. Now, in 1620, the Pilgrims settled in Massachusetts in Indian Territory and signed a treaty with the Wampanoag tribe to assure that they would protect them in their land. Now, a year later, in 1621, the Pilgrims had their first corn harvest in America and celebrated their Harvest Thanksgiving feast to celebrate their good fortune. This was the first Thanksgiving celebrated in America, and it had nothing to do with the so-called Native American or Native Indians at all. Now, meanwhile, the word got out in England about the paradise to be found in the New World. Now, religious zealots from the Church of England, called Puritans, began arriving to America by the boatload. Now, the Puritans mostly settled in the northeastern region of America, which is now, well, it was previously named New England by English explorer John Smith in 1616. Now, in 1616, these Puritans established an English colony in the present-day Massachusetts and later formed the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1629, which consisted of Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut. Although there were already Native Americans or Indians living in these areas, when the Puritans arrived and saw no fences around the land, they considered it to be public domain. Therefore, they had to seize the land from the natives in order to make it their own, which resulted in war. Now, the war between the Puritans or the Wampanoag tribe and the so-called Indians became the Pequot War, and it lasted from 1636 to 1638. Now, however, European armies prevailed and many Indians lost their lives in horrific fashion. Now, in 1637, near present-day Groton, Connecticut, the Puritan colonists raided the Indian villages and burned over 700 men, women, and children of the Pequot tribe, and they burned them alive. Now, the next day, the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony declared a day of Thanksgiving to be celebrated in honor of killing the native Indians of the land. In his own words, Governor John Winthrop's proclaimed, "This day shall be a day of celebration and thanksgiving for subduing the Pequots or Pequots." Now, after their victory over the so-called Indians, the colonists began to attack other villages, seizing their land, capturing strong young natives for slaves, and killing the rest. Women and children over 14 were sold into slavery while the rest were murdered. Boats loaded with as many as 500 slaves regularly left the ports of New England to other places following a very successful raid against the Pequot tribe in Stamford, Connecticut. Now, the white churches announced, or let's say the European churches announced, or let's say the Christian churches, that sounds a lot more tactful. The Christian churches announced a second day of Thanksgiving to give thanks to their God and celebrated victory over whom they called the heathen savages. Now, during the feasting, they played soccer with the chopped off heads of the natives and kicked them through the streets like soccer balls. Now, these were savages. Now, as other English and Dutch colonizers migrated to the U.S. and settled in other Indian tribal territories, they also raided and murdered various Indian tribes that were living in their regions. Now, some of the tribes included the Tuscarora, the Muskogee, the Cherokee Indian, the Catawba or the Catawba Indians, the Waxhaw, the Conagree, the Shawnee, you name it, the list goes on and on. But one thing that I will tell you, I just mentioned, we talked about slaves, so black people weren't the only ones who were slaves. Black people weren't the only ones who were on boats. Now, each of these tribes went to war against their colonizers, and many of their members were murdered, presumably followed by a Thanksgiving feast in honor of the Europeans' victory over the natives. Now, let me tell you something. Now, you had the Native Americans and you had blacks. Now, here's the difference between the Native Americans and the blacks. Now, the Indians died for what they believed. They weren't going to become slaves. Black people didn't die for what they believed. They became slaves. And if you look at what's going on with African American people, many of us are still psychological slaves. But when it comes to the Indians, they fought for what they believed in. So if you're listening to this video, Thanksgiving is not what it seems to be. We just been brainwashed into this Europeanism when it comes to the pagan holidays. Now, these Indian killing sprees became more and more spontaneous with the days of Thanksgiving feast being held after each successful massacre. For more than 2 centuries, days of Thanksgiving were celebrated by individual colonies and states, mainly in New England and other northern states. Now, when George Washington became the first president of America, he suggested that only one day of Thanksgiving per year be set aside of celebrating, or let's say for celebrating, each and every massacre. Then in 1863, in the midst of the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln decreed Thanksgiving Day to be a legal national holiday, And this is how the modern day Thanksgiving Day was born. Now, when it comes to Thanksgiving, we talked about the Native Americans. But now, how was Thanksgiving forced upon Black America? Well, after the Puritans, Pilgrims, and British, the Jewish and other European groups colonized the Americas and enslaved, transported, and murdered the natives from the land, they began the transatlantic slave, which shipped the Native Americans from the Americas to Europe and shipped the Hebrews from Africa to the Americas. Now, once our ancestors arrived here to the Americans, they were basically sold to a plantation. They were stripped of their Hebrew family customs and celebrations and forced to partake in those of their slave makers or their masters. Now, these celebrations included the European holidays, Christmas, which I'm going to get a video about Christmas in December, Easter, and I'm going to talk about Easter when Easter comes, and of course, Thanksgiving. Now, during slavery, the masters' holidays eventually became highly esteemed by the slaves as well because they were the only days that they were given off from their free labor. Now, some slave owners would even allow their slaves to visit their family members at other plantations. Therefore, the slaves grew to love the holidays such as Thanksgiving because it gave them a taste of freedom. And for over 300 years, the slaves were subliminally socialized to take great pleasure in the worship of another god, eating forbidden fruits such as swine, and celebrating the murder of another oppressed people in whom many were actually their bloodline relatives. Fast forward to today, we are still celebrating this pagan and genocidal holiday and taking great pleasure in doing so. Because every year, millions of black families look forward to Thanksgiving so they can get together with family and give thanks to God for all their blessings while eating pork, playing bingo, watching the game, and gossiping just like the pagans of ancient Rome. We as a people have grown to love Thanksgiving so much that it doesn't even cross our minds that this holiday was handed down to us by our slave masters as a celebration of the death of our own distant relatives, nor do we even care about it. Also, we don't even care to know about it because we just enjoy celebrating Thanksgiving because many of us as African Americans don't even know what Thanksgiving is. Now, in fact, for many of us, when the topics that I've mentioned in this video are mentioned to families in regards to why we celebrate holidays such as Thanksgiving, of course, they get mad at me as if I told them a lie. Now, I know this is the case within my own family because I've heard stories from others who have the same testimony. Now, we as a people have integrated so much into this Eurocentric society that we have become just like Europeans ourselves and prefer to hear more lies than the truth. Therefore, we will keep the traditions of our oppressors rather than keeping the traditions of our ancestors and speak out against those who will try to tell us what we are doing is backwards. Why? Because today we're basically mentally enslaved because this paganism has been forced upon us. And since it's been forced upon us, guess what? We continue to welcome it. Now again, many of us have been brainwashed into paganism. And this is what America is. It's a good country to live in, but what you have in this country is mostly Europeanism. Why did the Europeans come over? To get away from the King of England. But those people, known as pilgrims, took the Native Americans, slaughtered them. They were also slaves, but again, those slaves died for what they believed in, whereas black people didn't. And many of us are still suffering today. But at the end of the day, just want to tell you all, when it comes to Thanksgiving, I hope you were able to receive the truth about the roots of Thanksgiving and where it came from. Now, do I participate in the holiday? certainly for the free food and football, but I actually know what the holiday is about. And when I preach it to people, they're still brainwashed. They still think I'm the one who is wrong about Thanksgiving. That's because many African Americans don't read. But knowing that this holiday feast represents the Europeans' murder of the indigenous people of the land, and then finding out later that it's actually rooted in paganism, it makes me grow more to despise this holiday. And it's my hope that you all can take time to listen to this video. Now, I'm not telling you to withdraw from celebrating of the Thanksgiving holiday. I'm just giving you an idea of what it is and where it came from. But when it comes to anything, if you're seeking the truth, you have to do the research and make your own conclusions. I've already made my conclusions. So I'm just giving you the facts based on what I've investigated. Because at the end of the day, the choice is yours. You can either be a believer of Thanksgiving or you don't have to be a believer of Thanksgiving. But at the end of the day, it's your life. You make your life worth your value. But if you believe in God and you follow His principles, that's all you need to do. But when it comes to Thanksgiving, I know it's a pagan holiday. But many of us as African American people will be celebrating it. Even though we don't understand the history of it, we don't care about the history of it. As long as we're into that free food and football, and we're full, that's what we care about. And it's going to continue to go on for years to come. Because Thanksgiving is a pagan holiday. It is not a religious holiday. I want you all to know that. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show for this evening, Friday, November 9th, 2018. You can tune into the 411 Talk Zone radio show every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Blog Talk Radio. Guest call-in number is 215-383-5785. If you like my videos, please share and subscribe to the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube so I can give you quality information for educational purposes from a professional and mature perspective. Now, on this channel, I don't debate. I don't do too many controversial issues or emotional issues. Now, some of the information that I do deliver can be a bit sensitive, but that's based on my audience. And let me tell you something. I enjoy the subscribers and I want more subscribers. If you can bring more subscribers to my channel, that's fine. But what I want to tell you about this channel, the 411 Talk Zone radio show, this is not a channel that you're going to find drama, okay? This is a channel that is very positive, but I'm giving you information that is realistic. So this is why I do not participate in drama and or unnecessary bickering. I'm here to give you knowledge, and when you have knowledge, you have power. And remember, when it comes to YouTube, YouTube is not about the subscribers, it's about the viewership. But what I am asking you all to do is take time from dealing with all that drama and get into some education. Because the 411 Talk Zone radio show is a channel that is therapeutic, it's self-awareness, and it's an educational channel. Please, if you're going to celebrate any holiday, know what the holiday is about. Seek the truth, because that's what I've done. And if you have a topic, a new YouTube channel or business that you would like for me to discuss on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio, simply email me at lej6521@gmail.com. And if you have a comment, please leave your comment in the comment section under the video. But make sure that your comments are pithy. No bloviating, pettifogging, or filibustering if you wish to opine. Now that's it for this video. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. Remember, please be gentle and respectful to each other, and have a wonderful and blessed evening. God bless you, and good night.